listening to The Bell and Bartleby by Joshua Allen Deach, read for you by the author.
The bell of the safety coffin rang and rang. Bartleby the sexton counted. He had 7 apprentices left. The jagged-fanged underbite of the city skyline had just devoured the sun, and the red afterglow bled out between the toothy gaps. The young boys shivered at every jingle. Bartleby merely grumbled and guzzled from his wicker bottle. He stood, a pot-bellied scarecrow, in the frame of his front door, in the house that the church provided him in exchange for officiating as caretaker of every grave and sepulchre. His home, however, squatted at the far side of the churchyard, and he could not quite see the burial place whence came the ringing. Summer wriggled and died on the shortening days. It was this time of the year that the church gave the sexton a handful of orphan boys, his apprentices. Scapegraces and rascals all, Bartleby worked them hard, taught them the error of their ways and the value of honest labor. The bell rang. Bartleby mumbled surly indecipherables from the bristle of his whiskers. With pointed finger, nail-caked in grave loam, he sent another apprentice skittering away to investigate. The sexton had already sent one of his mentees out at the first occasion of ringing. Bartleby watched this second boy vanish up the hill. The sexton listened. The scapegraces listened, and then, just as the first time, a minute after the apprentice left, the bell fell silent. But then, was it 2 minutes after that? Bartleby mistrusted such flippant fragments of time. The bell commenced its jingling.
"Oh, beshrew it,"
cursed Bartleby. The sexton took another pull from the wicker bottle. Ring, ring, ring. Over the years, hundreds of patents for safety coffin designs had been filed, some more elaborate than others. The model employed in a few graves in Bartleby's churchyard involved a tube that rose from the coffin to the surface. A cord strung through the tube attached to a bell at the top. Should a body awaken, they had but to pull the cord. Bartleby had heard of designs that used flags and even pyrotechnics. Visiting clergy had told the sexton of small, trumpet-like tubing that went into the coffin, and priests would daily sniff the mouth of the tube to assess the putrefaction.
"Stuff and nonsense,"
Bartleby always said. Live burial was just the fanciful dread of the day. Thank you very much, Mr. Poe. The safety coffin bells rang often, true, but it was never anything to do with a live body. That is what Bartleby thought, and conference with his raggedy colleagues in the boneyard trade, conducted while imbibing over hogsheads, confirmed him in his opinion. It was always a rat chewing a cord or a bird caught in the works, never a live body. The closest any of the grave tenders came was Avery, Bartleby's best friend, whose nose Bartleby had once irreparably smashed on account of a perceived slight. Avery had spent a back-breaking night digging up a grave only to discover that the process of decay had caused the corpse to swell and shift and pull the cord. Yet and still one must check. It was Bartleby's duty. The bell yet rang. The sexton counted. He had 6 apprentices left. With a gesture and a stomp, Bartleby sent another lad tottering off to investigate. He watched the neophyte vanish up the hill. He imagined a cat accidentally hanging itself on the cord and being inconsiderately slow in the dying. It had happened before. The sexton scowled, but looking at the pale fright on the faces of the boys set a bout of black comedy boiling in Bartleby's gallbladder.
Ha!
He said to his young mentees.
That jingle is the best advert I ever did hear.
And with that, the sexton greasily sang to the broken tune of the bell.
Brave lodgings for one, brave lodgings for one, brave lodgings for one, brave lodgings for one.
A minute later, the bell surceased its ringing. But soon thereafter, it commenced its jingle. Bartleby took a longer pull from his wicker bottle. The sexton counted. He had 5 apprentices left. He imagined all the boys out there now, dancing and laughing at him. Yes, every one of them was in on it. A grand plot of jibes, that's what this was, at his expense. A conspiracy of scapegraces. The sexton spun and throttled a ragamuffin at random.
You little gutter snipes making a monkey out of me?
Bartleby said, anointing the poor waif's face with spit and bile. The boy shook his head thoroughly. The sexton shooed the lad out the door.
Go, see what the other rapscallions are up to. First one to come back with the truth gets supper tonight.
Bartleby watched the scamp vanish up the hill. He imagined resurrectionists breaking into the graveyard to ply their criminal trade. Body snatching had become epidemic, what with medical professors paying top dollar under the table for cadavers to carve up in their surgical theaters. Bartleby imagined the grave robbers bribing each of his boys one by one with a dirty coin. Certainly the little urchins would turn Judas for a penny. The sexton scowled an even more scowly scowl. But then, once again, the fearful faces of the remaining orphans turned Bartleby's sad fancy into smiling.
Wriggle, you grubs,
bellowed the sexton.
There's a revenant out there shambling for you, for each of you.
Bartleby lurched theatrically towards the children in a penny-dreadful shuffle. All of them shivered at his performance, and one even shrieked. Bartleby laughed like a punctured accordion. A minute later, the bell surceased its ringing. Bartleby chuckled. If he sent enough boys up the hill, it would bite into the grave robbers' profits. Sometime thereafter, the bell commenced its jingle. Bartleby's humors turned to gall and wormwood. The sexton counted. He had 4 apprentices left. With a cuff to the ear, he sent another fledgling out the door to investigate. Ring, ring, ring. The bell's chime had a familiar cadence. Bartleby thought back to when he was a boy, when his grandmother's mind went funny. Then she became bedridden, and her mind went cruel. It had been Bartleby's duty to feed her and change the clothes and bed linens. She had a bell that she rang in the exact same way when impatient for her meals. Ring, ring, ring. Bartleby remembered how she smiled at him when she purposefully voided her bowels. Ring, ring, ring. Bartleby remembered when Grandmama went full mad. He remembered the face she made at him when his mother was not looking, the face that caused him to faint and knock his head. The bell stopped ringing. Bartleby shuddered and wiped his clammy forehead. The bell commenced its jingle. Bartleby the sexton counted. He had 3 apprentices left. Without a word, he sent the next lad out the door to investigate. He watched the little tatterdemalion creep up the hill. Ring, ring, ring. Bartleby imagined something sitting in a dug-up grave, skin pale as a frog's belly. He imagined the rancid thing wallowing in the fetid soil, too bloated to even move now, but it could still reach the cord. Ring, ring, ring. With every ring, another meal. The more it has, the more it wants. Gory mastication. The belly distends and bursts. And still it eats, still it eats. Each new meal birthing out of the bloody hole in a slick of guts and swill. The bell stopped ringing. The sexton shuddered. Looking at the terrified boys before him, Bartleby experienced something that felt a little like guilt and a lot like regret.
Poor little mudlarks,
He thought to himself.
to be orphaned, then dealt this. If the bell rings again, I'll go on the next one.
The sexton repeated this to himself as a prayer while he readied his lantern and spade.
I'll go on the next one.
The bell commenced its jingle. Bartleby the sexton shoved the next orphan, sobbing and pleading, out the door and into the mournful gloom. A minute later, which encompasses 60 unscrupulous seconds, each of which may crawl or dash without warning, the bell ceased to ring. But sometime thereafter, it commenced its jingle. And still the bell is ringing. The sky is now dark. The moon is young and shy and sheds little light on the graves in the shadow of the church. The wicker bottle lies empty on the floor. Bartleby the sexton counts. Somehow, 8 scapegraces had become 1. Soon, there will be no more. Ring, ring, ring. There will only be the bell and Bartleby.
You have been listening to The Bell and Bartleby by Joshua Allen Deach, read for you by the author. Thank you for being a patron.